Adesso
Thank you, Fernando. Now I would like to move on to the second round, which will be much shorter. So I would like to ask the panelists to be even more concise. We will have maximum 3 minutes available for each one. And my question for this second round is this one. What is the impact of these transnational agreements? Do they have a tangible impact at the corporate level? Because we also know that these transnational agreements are considered, especially by the management, as one element of their corporate social responsibility element, strategy, sorry. And so they're a little bit like public relations actions. So the question is, what is the tangible impact of these transnational agreements? And this time, too, I would like to start with James Ritchie. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you. I think quite simply put, international framework agreements or agreements with transnational corporations on a global basis have to be able to protect and promote trade union rights for people everywhere where the company operates, and they have to deliver more union members. They simply have to do both of those things. Because for many companies, having an international framework agreement or some other relationship with a global union federation means that they can tick the box of corporate social responsibility. So when NGOs come to do their social auditing, the company can say, yes, we've got a relationship with a global union federation, tick the box, move on. And for many transnational corporations, the international framework agreement is the end point. For us, it's the beginning. It's the beginning to be able to have a forum in which to resolve disputes about trade union rights. It's the beginning of being able to have workers access those rights and us being able to talk to the global headquarters of that company and say, we've got a problem here, the workers can't access their rights. And because our time is limited, I won't talk about too many examples, but recently, over the last 12 or 18 months, we have an international framework agreement with Sodexo, the global catering company, and that framework agreement not only states that workers have rights, but it sets up some processes where those workers can access their rights to join a union and bargain collectively. And of course, this has been a bit of a shock to the company to find out that we intend to organise and give those workers those rights within India, which is Sodexo's second biggest market. There is no union organisation in India. The local managers have not heard about this framework agreement that is signed in Paris, but unless it delivers rights for workers to organise, bargain collectively and improve their wages and conditions, then the framework agreement is a complete waste of time as far as our global union federation, the IUF, is concerned. On the other hand, if it does facilitate access for workers to bargain collectively, exercise their trade union rights, then it is a very important tool indeed. And just to finalise, it is a tool towards an end. It is not an end in itself as far as a global union federation is concerned. Thank you.
Grazie, James.
Thank you, James. Now the question goes to Pavakhtar. What is the tangible impact of these agreements?
Of these agreements can be considerable. The first thing to note is that when we sign global agreements, the primary objective of a global agreement is to create a safe space in order for unions to start organising workers. That has to be the critical factor. Create a space where unions are allowed to organise workers without fear of persecution or recrimination, because that is too often absent in many countries and in many workplaces, despite sometimes good legislation in countries. The second thing I'd probably say is that we're finding it increasingly difficult, even in the European context, to sign multinational agreements with companies. And one of the reasons for that, and this happened very recently with the commerce sector, the garment workers issue, companies were worried that if they signed an agreement, they would be held legally responsible. Well, yes, that is ultimately a purpose, to hold companies responsible for activities that they, if they are not safeguarding the right of freedom of association, that they should be held accountable for this. But this is also preventing a number of multinational companies or transnational companies from entering into agreements, formal agreements, and they would rather have an understanding than a written agreement. So this is a culture that we have to challenge. We have to persuade these multinationals that there is value in joining signing up to a global agreement. But we have to use the power within the trade union movement in order to demonstrate that we have the weight of the workers behind us, that we are intent on using these global agreements to help reduce the risk that a company faces. Now, for example, with the Bangladesh story, that we've used a lot of our European organisations, European unions and national unions within the European context were lobbying these companies, these multinationals in the national context, saying that your brand is being damaged in our country, in Europe, for example, because you simply aren't protecting the rights of workers in other countries. And if you have a global agreement that protects the right of all workers, then you can use that in a global context. I'll stop there, and I will just say this, that sometimes the global agreements have to be renegotiated, and we've done that recently with Securitas and Carrefour, because sometimes when those global agreements are not proving to be effective, we have to have the courage to say that this is not working. We have to have the courage to say that this needs to be reviewed, and we need to rewrite this agreement, and that's what we've done with Securitas and Carrefour recently.
Ok, grazie mille. Quindi io a questo punto...
Thank you very much. I would like to ask Denise, you already mentioned in your first intervention that they are trying to implement global agreements, so I would like to ask him, have they had any impact in your context?
In some companies who have global framework agreements, help the collective agreement, help the organizing, give contribution with relations between union and the company. And I can give some examples for Turkey. The Real Alliance, the Carrefour Alliance help the union to organize other national domestic companies. So this kind of contribution. But in some companies, global framework agreements do not exist. The local management don't recognize it, don't respect it. I can also give some examples. H&M has a global agreement with Uni, but we can't organize. They don't respect union, and in Turkey, I mean. And the Securitas, as mentioned before, they have also global framework agreement. In the Securitas job interview questionnaire, when a worker applied to job in Securitas, in the form, there is one question: do you member of any union? So this is another example. At DHL campaign, there is Uni and the ITF joint campaign now, and I think the global framework agreement will help this situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denise. Quindi erano osservazioni anche piuttosto critiche e quindi...
Those were rather critical remarks. I would like to ask Luca what the situation is at the European level. Well, first of all, Franco Martini was rightly saying that often we just tickle the multinational company. We don't have much power, but there are different situations. We had a seminar in Poland a few weeks ago, and our Polish colleagues brought us the two cases. For example, Volkswagen, where after great difficulties, a Polish trade union was able to have Volkswagen implement the same criteria in terms of working conditions and wages that are applied in Germany. And on the other hand, we have the example of telecommunications sector companies that were, despite the existence of global or European agreements, these agreements are not respected by the local management. This depends also on the strength of a trade union, not only by the goodwill of the enterprises. And this strength by the trade union varies from country to country and also within the same country according to the sector. The two things that we have to do, at least at the European level, to try and solve this problem and to fully exploit the potential of these transnational agreements in order to do something more than tickle the multinational company, on the one hand, is to strengthen our collective bargaining ability and applicability of agreements. The only way to do that is for national federation to try as much as possible to strengthen their representation within multinational companies, and on the other hand, they also have to give a clear mandate to the European and international federations, because without this mandate, the European and international federations have no chance to influence these processes. This nationalism that is coming out due to the crisis, unfortunately, exists also within the trade union movement, because very often we are so busy with our own domestic problem and we don't have the will to shift the attention towards the international level. Another element is that, at least at the European level, we need a legal framework in order to give a legal foundation to the agreements and to make them really applicable to all countries. We are developing on the mandate of European Federation. We are negotiating with the European Commission to reach this legal framework. You should know that the entrepreneurs' organizations do not want to hear about it. The only chance that we have to achieve this result is to act on the European Parliament on the one hand, but also on national governments and on multinational enterprises and on sectors organization of entrepreneurs. If we talk to Business Europe, we will have no chance to achieve this result. This means, and I conclude, that your role as national federations of the sector is essential, because you are able to influence the position of sectoral entrepreneurial organization, but also the stance of the respective governments within the discussion at the European level, because the Commission, together with the trade unions at the European level alone, will not be able to solve this problem. From the grassroots, from the companies, from the countries, from national trade unions, there should be a thrust to achieve real change in this sector. Thank you. Thank you, Luca. And I now give the floor immediately. I would like to add two considerations to what Luca said. I completely agree with what he said. First of all, a further ingredient, the value of this dimension of global bargaining, transnational agreement, has to become a mindset of our organization. We need contamination, knowledge. We need to have a contagion about the awareness of this. First of all, this is a great cultural, trade union culture operation that has to move forward. That is why projects such as this one and a project of a more overall trade union training program is important. Number two, testing. How many did the Commission count in terms of agreement? 230, whatever the number is. Luca was talking about some positive experiences. We should identify 2, 3, 4 cases, further cases, and And we should start testing these cases from the beginning, how the agreement is built, how it's managed, how it's implemented, how it lives in the various countries, so that then we can reason on the results of testing, and under the heading that the multinational for us is an enterprise based on trade union freedom, founded on the right of every worker to be acknowledged and be represented by a trade union. The first article of any agreement that we should sign is this one. Thank you. So we conclude with Fernando with his observation from the Spanish trade union viewpoint. Thank you. The question was on the value and impact of these agreements. The value is great, the impact is limited, at least for the time being. I believe that this is due to a main reason. Though the existing agreements are born with an offensive vocation, namely they are the fruit of the initiative and the proposal of the trade union movement, in general, they want to replace weaknesses at the national level when a transnational agreement should be the fruit of the national trade union strength in a series of countries. So the impact is limited. However, we must acknowledge that in tangible situations, for example, where there are clear objectives, those where the necessary means are implemented, and with certain circumstances, for example, the agreement on the Bangladesh case, yes, there are results and there are positive examples. So in Algeria, for example, the Carrefour trade union in Colombia, after Unicomercio work in Latin America at the local level. Of course, Carrefour has subsidiary companies in Spain as well, but everything is useful. I would like to conclude by saying that I mentioned a whole series of tools and means to achieve these alliances and to develop these agreements. If they are developed in a proactive way, they can produce results. If we approach them mechanically and bureaucratically, within the national level and international level, this has an impact. It will continue to have a limited impact. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I would like to thank all the speakers for being so disciplined in sticking with the time at their disposal, so we were able to conclude this panel.